Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, April 6th, 2011. I'm transmitting, excuse me, it's not water. I'm transmitting from the secure location. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. If I don't have your email and you'd like to receive the script of each show, send me your email to my new email address, which is goldyrant@gmail.com. Like I've said in the past, I'm in the secure location, and I'm absolutely convinced that lowered expectations equals more happiness. And I realized that on day zero. Day zero is something invented. It's now day 2 here at the secure location, but day 0 was if you can get here in the middle of the day and still have the full day, that's what day 0 is. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about how the structural regulatory defect is responsible for the Southwest Airlines plane where the roof was ripped off mid-flight. I'm going to talk about how the structural regulatory defect is at work in BP's request to resume drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm going to show how fixing the structural regulatory defect would be possible through Senator John Cornyn's bullshit request for a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I'm going to show how the structural regulatory defect is responsible, for GE's receipt of a $3.2 billion refund from the IRS. A few days ago, a 5-foot rip occurred in the ceiling of a Southwest Airlines Boeing-built jet. As you may know, my opinion is always that there exists a structural regulatory defect which allows the regulated to write the regulations. This was detailed in the March 30th, 2011 rant entitled Undeclared Wars Number 4, Libya, Commons Number 5, Structural Regulatory Defect, Fracking, and Roads. Basically, corporations and other groups are legally allowed to donate as much as they want to politicians because of a Supreme Court created free speech right for these entities. Additionally, since politicians and the regulators take the jobs with the same companies that they regulated when they were in government service, they write favorable regulations or just use the industry-created regulations as their own work. Hence, the regulated write the regulations. Now let's get back to that jet in a story in the New York Times dated April 4th, 2011 entitled Hole in Jet Attributable to Cracks by Joseph Berger and Duff Wilson. Let me give you a few telling quotes. Robert L. Sumwalt, a member of the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, said in a telephone interview from Arizona that the fatigue would not have been apparent on a visual inspection of the lap joints in the fuselage, and that current regulations do not require high-tech techniques like ultrasound that might have detected the hidden cracks, close quotes. So, we have the technology to see the type of fatigue that leads to chunks of an airplane ripping off. So that you can see daylight at 35,000 feet. It is not, however, required to be used to inspect the planes. Obviously, because it costs money to do these ultrasounds, and the airline industry cannot raise fares to cover the increased cost, which would mean it would get into their profits. Therefore, the regulations written by the industry do not require the technology. It's funny, no taxes, no services means no mufflers. The structural regulatory defect is at work. Another quote. When asked about the new finding of hidden cracks, Ian Gregor, a spokesman for the FAA, referred to an earlier statement that said, quotes, "The FAA is working closely with the NTSB, Southwest Airlines, and Boeing to determine what actions may be necessary." I will bet a lot of money that this particular statement is absolutely true, and that there will be no tightening of the regulations following this almost fatal event. Quotes, "A total of 288 Boeing 737-300s are flying for airlines in the United States and 931 worldwide, according to the FAA. Southwest said the 737-300s are the oldest planes in its fleet." By the way, this one was 5 years old. Boeing, in a statement, said it has seen no reason to take fleet-wide action involving the planes. The company said it is monitoring all of its in-service planes and helping Southwest and the NTSB. Close quotes. Good. Good. Actually, great. I agree with Boeing that it sees no reason to do anything. They are not supposed to unilaterally do anything except whatever is in its own best interest. And obviously in conformity with the regulations that we write. If we don't write the regulations that say they have to use the ultrasounds, they won't use them, and I don't want them to use them. I don't want them to want to do something. I want them to have to do something. I also have to assume that they have risk-sharing agreements with the airlines, that's Boeing, that purchase their aircraft, and that those agreements probably require airlines to do maintenance to a certain level and inspections to a certain level. If Southwest does not do this, then there may be warranties that lapse, warranties written by Boeing to Southwest. In any event, it is up to us, through our regulatory agency, to actually write regulations that protect the commons. In this case, our ability to fly in planes that don't break apart at 35,000 feet. Some libertarians will argue that the airline industry and its safety is not an item for regulation. I'm okay with that, except that we have currently and in the past decided that the regulation of the aircraft flying over our homes is something that we care to have regulated. So I run into that assumption that we do want to regulate the safety of the airlines. It is now up to us to regulate cheaply and effectively, and it is in that case that we do not do that, due to the structural regulatory defect created by Citizens United that can only be overturned by a constitutional amendment. Excuse me. We cannot deny that when something like this happens, however, the airline to which this happens will get, sorry, this English is terrible. I can't deny that when this happens, that particular airline will get additional scrutiny by passengers buying the tickets. No doubt. So the market does partially work in this case. I mean, if you're going to fly Southwest, you'd probably want to know if it was a 737-300. I would. But memories fade very quickly, and there will be no great rush to change any meaningful regulations by the industry. And I mean change any regulations by the industry, because it is the industry that writes the regulations, subject to Obama's re-election. Everything that we're doing between now and November of 2012 is going to be affected by messaging from the Obama administration to get re-elected. So there may be something that you hear about if this stays in the news for any period of time. Probably won't. You may remember that the structural regulatory defect idea was invented by me on my third or fourth BP oil gusher rant last year. It took images of the gusher and the ensuing outcry of evil BP, regulations caused this, and Obama was weak, to get my brain going on the crisis and the development of the theory of the structural regulatory defect. Now, obviously, some other people have come up with this, but I independently kind of came up with my own idea of what was wrong with BP and the regulations, and there's something wrong there. Well, they're back at it again. There's an article in the New York Times dated April 4th, 2011 entitled BP Seeks to Resume Drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. Here are some quotes. BP asked the United States regulators for permission to resume drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, two company officials said on Sunday, creating a delicate situation for the Obama administration as it seeks to balance safety concerns with a desire to increase domestic oil production. Close quotes. Remember, everything that we hear out of the White House, you're just going to have to, I'm going to keep repeating it, but you got to remember that. Everything we hear out of the White House from today until the election is pure message designed for the re-election of Obama. Quotes. BP is seeking permission to continue drilling at 10 existing deepwater production and development wells in the region in July in exchange for adhering to stricter safety and supervisory rules, said one of the officials. In exchange for adhering to stricter safety and supervisory rules. In exchange for adhering to rules. An agreement could be reached within the next month, but would not include new drilling, the official said. Close quotes. I'm confused here. What are they negotiating about? Aren't there regulations passed by the Congress, signed by the President, and implemented by a division of the Department of the Interior, which, by the way, is a part of the administrative branch and is underneath the executive? Here's a quote that certainly does not answer my critical question. Melissa Schwartz, a spokeswoman for the Bureau of Ocean Management, Regulations, and Enforcement, the federal agency that oversees the development of resources in the Gulf, said on Sunday that there was no deal with BP. Toby O'Doney, a spokesman for BP, declined to comment. The regulator had recently started to permit some deep water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. Royal Dutch Shell won approval on Wednesday to drill off the coast of Louisiana on the condition that rigorous new safety standards were met. Other companies that have been allowed to continue drilling in the region include ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BHP Billiton. Never heard of them, but it would be fun to figure out who they are. Federal officials have said any company that wants to resume drilling in the Gulf would have to meet the new safety requirements. Would have to meet. Well, that last one, I guess, helped my confusion. Here's a little more. They, quotes, the new regulations include new standards for well-designed casing and cementing. Companies would also require verification from a third party that safety devices like blowout preventers, which failed during the BP spill, were properly designed and tested. I don't understand what they're saying in this article. I don't understand what's being negotiated. I don't understand why rules aren't just implemented and they have to follow them. I don't understand. Where is this discretion that the company has to tell the agency that oversees its regulations that we want the regulations to look like this, or we won't agree with them? When do I get a voice in, I don't like the 70-mile-per-hour speed limit between Austin and Dallas because I don't agree with it? Well, I'm the regulated when I'm driving, and the regulations are the speed limit. I like 75. Why won't they pick up my phone? Why won't they answer my email? Why won't they give me a meeting? Because I don't pay them money. I don't have the money to pay them that BP does, or that Exxon does, or that Chevron does, or that BHP Billiton does. I have an audience member that's in my light. Excuse me, son. Thank you. Let's move on to the this GE story and its $3.2 billion tax refund. This was reported about a week ago. The name of the article is GE's Strategies Let It Avoid Taxes Altogether by David Kosciuszko, published March 24, 2011 in the New York Times. Remember, I'm stressing the nature of the structural regulatory defect and how it is in play in almost 60% of the problems facing the United States today. This 60% number was something I made up last week. Completely made up, anecdotal. But yet every story that I see has it in it. Every story. In any event, GE is able to lobby exactly like Southwest Airlines, who write their own regulations related to ultrasounding its airplanes. BP and its negotiations with the federal government over regulations for drilling in the Gulf, and now GE and its negotiations with the IRS and its actual writing of tax policy on its own behalf. Here's a nice quote from the article. In January, President Obama named Jeffrey R. Immelt, General Electric's chief executive, to head the President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. So their chief executive is on one of the President's councils. Why is he on the council? Maybe I should be on the council. I just don't pay enough money. Quotes, he understands what it takes for America to compete in the global economy, Mr. Obama said. Clearly, that's a true statement. The company reported worldwide profits of $14.2 billion and said $5.1 billion of the total came from its operations in the United States. Its American tax bill? None. In fact, GE claimed a tax benefit of $3.2 billion. That may be hard to fathom for the millions of American business owners and households now preparing their own returns, but low taxes are nothing new for GE. The company has been cutting the percentage of its American profits paid to the Internal Revenue Service for years, resulting in a far lower rate than at most multinational companies. Its extraordinary success is based on an aggressive strategy that mixes fierce lobbying for tax breaks and innovative accounting that enables it to concentrate its profits offshore. GE's giant tax department, led by a bow-tied former Treasury official named John Samuels, is often referred to as the world's best tax law firm. Indeed, the company's slogan, "Imagination at Work," fits this department well. I didn't make that up. It's in the quote. The team includes former officials not just from the Treasury, but also from the IRS and virtually all the tax writing committees in Congress. Okay, the team at GE includes former officials not just from the Treasury, but also from the IRS and virtually all the tax writing committees in Congress. While General Electric is one of the most skilled at reducing its tax burden, many other companies have become better at this as well. Excuse me. Although the top corporate tax rate in the United States is 35%, one of the highest in the world, companies have been increasingly using a maze of shelters, tax credits, and subsidies to pay far less, close quotes. All right, I don't need to read any more of this to tell you that the exact same structural regulatory defect is at work, and we, the American taxpayers, get screwed. We actually paid that $3.2 billion to GE. GE and these other large companies that can afford to lobby and donate own the regulations that are enforced against them. Where am I wrong here? Plus, they've got everybody who ever worked in any monetary financial position in the government is working at GE to specifically come up with these. What did they say that they know how to get? A maze of shelters, tax credits, and subsidies. How do you think they get those? Those are regulations. They just happen to be tax regulations. Let's look at another example that comes out of a blurb in the Austin American-Statesman dated April 1st, 2011, entitled, FDA panel rejects warning label for dyes, says evidence is lacking. Even though this is about dyes, it is the exact same structural regulatory defect at work. An expert advisory panel of the Food and Drug Administration said Thursday, this is the quote, that there was not enough scientific evidence linking artificial colors with hyperactivity to warrant a warning label or new restrictions on thousands of processed foods colored by chemicals. Quotes, if we put a label that long on every chemical and ingredient that hasn't been adequately studied, you wouldn't see the package anymore, said Tim Jones, Tennessee's deputy state epidemiologist and a member of the panel. All right, I just have to read this. Just listen to the quote. If we put a label that long on every chemical and ingredient that hasn't been adequately studied, that's the point. Does Mr. Jones take any donations from the food industry that he's trying to regulate? Is Mr. Jones from that industry, or is he going back there when he leaves public office? Another quote. All the major safety bodies globally have reviewed the available science and have determined that there is no demonstrable link between artificial food colors and hyperactivity among children, said a statement issued by the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which represents food makers, retailers, and packagers. Okay, let me read that quote because it's important. All of the major safety bodies globally have reviewed the available science and have determined that there is no demonstrable link between artificial food colors and hyperactivity among children. Have you seen the movie Thank You for Smoking? These are the exact same words given to the makers of mobile phones by the protagonist of the movie, a lobbyist, at the very end. He moves from the tobacco industry, and you have these guys say there is no demonstrable link between cell phones and brain cancer. He has them repeat those words. That's how the movie ends. They're the exact same words that these guys are saying about this possible whatever. You need to see that movie. It details the lobbying aspect of the structural regulatory defect in a funny, because it's true, way. I love it. I mean, you laugh, but you kind of cry when you watch that movie. Well, here it is. It's the exact same words. Did anybody else see the movie and read this article? Well, nobody reads, so the answer is no. All right, I want to look at the ability of the donors to donate for a moment. There was an op-ed in the New York Times entitled Bring Donors Out of the Shadows, written by David Callahan, published April 3rd, 2011. He also details one way to at least acknowledge the structural regulatory defect with legislation, not the far more difficult constitutional amendment that I suggest. Quotes, the billionaire industrialist brothers Charles and David Koch have drawn sharp criticism for their extensive giving to libertarian causes. Though some of their organizational ties are public, many are unknown. thanks to provision in the tax code that allows the Koch brothers and other donors on both the left and the right to conceal the recipients of their largesse, even as they get to write it off on their taxes. Fortunately, there is a solution to this problem. Require all nonprofit organizations that engage in political advocacy to reveal their donors. This was, I think, the kiss and tell legislation that they tried to get passed last year, and it failed. True, individuals must disclose on their tax returns the details of large gifts to charitable organizations known as 501c3 groups from the section of the tax code governing them. But this information is kept private by the Internal Revenue Service. While gifts given directly through foundations must be made public, the wealthy can give without leaving fingerprints by routing money through donor-advised funds sponsored by 501c3 groups, which don't have to publicly name their donors. And thanks to the Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, things are getting even worse. That decision now allows organizations that can engage in overt partisan work called 501c4 groups to take unlimited corporate money, again, without revealing their donors. In many cases, organizations have both 501c3 and 501c4 arms that work closely together in the same building to shape government policy. One such group is FreedomWorks, which has received significant amounts of money from the Koch brothers and is a force behind both the Tea Party political movement and the conservative libertarian policy agenda it espouses. Beyond requiring more transparency, the law also needs to make finer distinctions among nonprofits. The Koch brothers rightly note that their activist giving is just a small part of their overall philanthropy. David Koch, for example, is given extensively to the New York City Ballet. But the tax rules treat the brothers' giving to medical research or modern art museums exactly the same as their gifts to ideologically driven organizations like the Cato Institute. All are classified as charity. This is an unfair use of public tax subsidies. The Internal Revenue Service doesn't allow tax filers to write off their donations to politicians or parties because that would mean Republicans would be subsidizing Democratic political efforts and vice versa. So why should gifts that often seek the same outcomes through nonprofit organizations be treated differently? In response, the Internal Revenue Service should create a new category for nonprofits engaged in policy advocacy. Such groups would have to disclose all their donors, while traditional 501c3s, museums and universities, for example, could continue to receive anonymous gifts. So he's trying to make a distinction here. The IRS should also set a ceiling on the deductibility of such gifts to limit the extent to which all taxpayers subsidize de facto political giving by the wealthy. The treatment of small gifts would remain unchanged to encourage ordinary Americans to engage in civic life. These reforms won't be easy. It would be difficult to define which groups belong in the new advocacy category, and such decisions must be made in a careful, nonpartisan manner. Good luck. But the result would make sense. The public has a right to know how tax-exempt donations are being used and by whom, as well as a right not to foot the bill for political activism by the super wealthy. The United States is known for its vibrant nonprofit sector. Today, though, this sector has become yet one more avenue for the wealthy to try to dominate civic life. If we care at all about political equality, we must regulate the growing flood of money into this arena. That's the end of it. David Callahan is a senior fellow at Demos and author of Fortunes of Change, The Rise of the Liberal Rich and Remaking of America. Callahan is getting to the heart of the defect. We elitists must acknowledge the problem before we can find a solution. Then we can find a way to implement our solutions through Glenn Beck, O'Reilly, Rush, and Hannity, the true message carriers in media today. That's my opinion. Hang on, sorry. I've said in the past that the only way to solve this problem is a constitutional amendment, contrary to Callahan, that cannot be overturned by a future Congress or Supreme Court. It's much more difficult to pass. A lot of you have said to me that an amendment cannot be passed. I disagree. Also, sometimes the very legislators that propose stupid-sounding legislation or constitutional amendments can be used as pawns to get our stuff passed. Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas, is doing just that as a special contributor in an op-ed to the Austin American-Statesman dated February 16, 2011. Quotes, in recent weeks, pundits and columnists have called the prospect of a constitutional amendment delusional and a Pandora's box that will allow politicians to fiddle with the Constitution. But Texas leaders who want to petition Congress to call a convention are onto something. A convention is not only one of the constitutional ways to begin the amendment process, but also a proven way to motivate Washington to adopt needed reforms. Far from being delusional, popular support for a constitutional convention is a proven way to spur Congress to adopt long-neglected reforms. The prospect of another convention prompted Congress to adopt the Bill of Rights, close quotes. John Cornyn, I could not have put it any better. I'm proud of you. You've come around to my way of thinking. You're willing to shoot yourself in the foot by amending the Constitution to create term limits for you, to limit campaign contributions so that no group, corporation, or union can give you anything of value. Only individuals can donate no more than $100. You're willing to limit your ability to go to work for the very companies that donated to your campaigns and got favorable regulations and tax treatments. You are a great man. Wait a minute. Maybe I should have read the whole article and not just taken pieces that agree with my position. Turns out that Cornyn wants an amendment for a balanced budget by the federal government. Oh well. That's what he's talking about. But I think we should use his reasoning to fix the actual problem of the structural regulatory defect that is all over tonight's rant. I'm in the secure location, as I've said before. Monday night, a friend brought a girl up to me and she said she was interested in the rant. He's heard it before, and you know, I'm usually very hesitant. I looked at him and he nodded his head. Give it to her. So I did. I went straight for the jugular. I asked her, is it okay to kill Libyan babies? Her response was, do you have proof that they, not we, are killing Libyan babies? She did the argument that all Obama lovers give, that this is a humanitarian crisis or genocide, and that it is the UN that the U.S. is assisting. And we definitely aren't killing any Libyan babies. I love it. This is exactly the type of lefty, anti-war lefty during the Iraq War, that is okay with this particular one. A few days ago on MSNBC, it was reported that a NATO airstrike killed 5 rebels by mistake. It was reported that a NATO airstrike killed 5 rebels by mistake. Remember the way to beat a lie detector test? Focus on the one true thing. Why is it that Obama supporters require me to show them evidence of dead babies? I believe it is up to supporters of the war to prove to me that we are not. In Iraq, we killed 150,000 people. Isn't that the number when we were getting towards a genocide? Or is 100,000 dead at genocide? Or is 10,000 dead at genocide? Or is 50 dead babies at genocide? I don't know. She ran away. She didn't have anything. Come out of the closet, Obama supporters, Libyan babies killing supporters. Let's talk. Were you okay with Iraq? Were you okay with Afghanistan? You okay with Pakistan? You okay that Egypt is still torturing for us? The vice president's in power. Are you okay that Iraq's putting down nonviolent protests? All right. Here in the secure location, the Nicoya cops were rousting people last night. They come once a month and shake down people for their passport, which only a few people carry, for their weed and belligerence. Thank God I wasn't there, as I hate shakedowns, always. I hate being stopped by cops. I hate being filmed. I hate being searched. I hate being restrained. And I hate civil liberties being violated in any country, anywhere, even if they might not be constitutionally protected rights in Costa Rica. It's painful and scary. No taxes, no services, that's the price you pay, I guess. They don't get paid enough. That's how they get paid. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all who support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurelodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica, which has, by the way, the best landscaping I've ever seen. CNC Surf School in Samara, www.cncsurfsamara.webs.com. La Vela Latina, a great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara. Ambar Tequila at www.santosspirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool little hotel in Samara at www.villablancasamara.com. And of course, the Delegate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Thanks for coming out.